Welcome to another deep dive. Today we're tackling Iran. We've got a whole stack of sources, history, geography, politics, you name it.
And maybe even a few surprises along the way, hopefully.
I think so, yeah. Now, we'll be saying Iran a lot today, but I got to ask, how do actual Iranians pronounce it?
Well, in Farsi, it's more like E-air.
E-air, emphasis on the second syllable. Got it.
Yeah.
What about Persia? Is that still a thing?
Oh, you'll definitely hear Persia when talking history or like in poetry and cultural stuff.
But Iran is the official name.
Yep, has been since 1935.
Good to know. So one thing that surprised me, Iran is really mountainous, like way more than I thought.
Oh, yeah. It's one of the most mountainous countries in the world, actually.
Wow.
And all those mountain ranges you see on the map.
The Caucasus, the Zagros.
Yeah, all of them have had a huge impact on, well, how Iran developed.
So they're not just pretty scenery, they actually shaped the course of history.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, mountains create natural barriers, right? And that's affected, like, everything. Ancient trade routes, how different cultures developed within Iran, the whole thing. It's a land of incredible diversity.
That makes so much sense. Okay, and speaking of dramatic landscapes, there's the Lit Desert.
You mean the hottest place on Earth?
Yeah. Apparently, satellite measurements have recorded temperatures of 70.7 degrees Celsius, which is, what is that in Fahrenheit?
159.
159 degrees. I'm sweating just thinking about it.
But hey, don't let the extremes fool you. Iran also has those lush Caspian Hyrcanian mixed forests up north.
Oh, right.
They're a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Tons of biodiversity there.
This is what I love about these deep dives.
Yeah.
You always learn these unexpected details. Like, did you know that Iran is the world's biggest exporter of caviar?
That's right. The Caspian Sea is a haven for sturgeon. You know, the fish that give us those prized black eggs.
Fancy. Okay, mountains, deserts, caviar. Seems like Iran has it all. But let's rewind a bit. Thousands of years of history here. Where do we even start?
Well, we could spend hours on each period, but I think for now, let's focus on a few key empires, right? The ones that really had a lasting impact on Iran, on the world even. Let's start with the Medes and Persians.
The Medes and Persians. Isn't that where polo came from?
That's right. And then you have the Achaemenids.
Yeah.
You know, famous for their vast empire and incredible architecture like Persepolis.
Oh, yeah.
Then there's the Parthians, known for their military strength. They were actually able to hold off the Roman Empire.
Wow.
And lastly, we have the Sasanians. Their art and culture was super influential across Asia and Europe during the Middle Ages.
So each of these empires added its own, like, distinct flavor to Iranian history.
Exactly. And you can still see their influence today, not just in museums, I mean in the whole cultural fabric of Iran.
Wow. Okay, so it's like these empires built the foundation for modern Iran, in a way.
Yeah, you could say that. But of course, there's more recent history, too. You can't forget the Pahlavi dynasty, the Iranian Revolution of 1979, and how the Islamic Republic came to be.
All right, listener, now we're getting into the complexities of Iranian politics. We've mentioned the Islamic Republic a few times, but what does that actually mean in terms of, like, how the country is run?
Well, it's a pretty unique system. It blends elements of theocracy with democracy.
Oh, okay.
At the very top, you have the supreme leader. They hold ultimate authority on a whole range of issues.
Okay, so when you say ultimate authority, what does that actually include?
Well, they're the commander-in-chief of the military, the head of the judiciary, and they appoint key officials. It's a pretty powerful position.
Wow. And then there's the Assembly of Experts.
Right.
They're the ones who can, like, technically dismiss the supreme leader, right?
Yep, that's right. The Assembly of Experts is made up of Islamic scholars who are actually elected by the people.
Huh.
They're the ones who choose the supreme leader. And yeah, they have the power to remove him too.
So there is some form of checks and balances within the system.
You could say that, but to really grasp Iranian politics, you have to look beyond just the rules on paper. You know what I mean? You got to look at the reality on the ground. The relationship between the supreme leader and the Assembly of Experts is, well, it's constantly evolving.
So it sounds like Iranian politics are a whole deep dive in themselves. But let's switch gears for a sec. Let's talk about the economy. I think when most people hear Iran, they immediately think oil.
It makes sense. They have the third largest proven oil reserves in the world.
And the second largest for natural gas.
Yep. And those resources have had a massive impact on Iran's economy, that's for sure.
But I was reading that their economy is actually more diverse than just oil.
Oh, absolutely.
Yep.
For instance, their automotive industry is booming.
Really?
Did you know they're the 12th largest car manufacturer globally?
No way. That's impressive. What else is going on?
Well, construction's a big sector. And get this, Iran's got a burgeoning tech scene.
Okay.
Advancements in biotechnology, nanotechnology, pharmaceuticals, all sorts of things.
Wow, so they're innovating in some seriously cutting-edge fields. That's unexpected.
It is, isn't it? It's a complicated economic picture for sure. They face challenges, especially with international sanctions and all that. But there's a lot of potential there, too, a lot of room for growth and innovation.
Okay, so we've covered mountains, deserts, history, politics, even the economy. But we can't talk about Iran without mentioning his culture.
Of course not. And what's more iconic than Persian carpets? They're famous all over the world for those intricate designs, for the sheer skill of the weavers.
They really are like pieces of art. Speaking of art, Iran has this incredibly rich art history, right? I mean, spanning thousands of years.
Yeah, it's mind-boggling. I mean, get this. They even have what might be the world's oldest animation.
Wait, what?
It's on a 5,000-year-old goblet.
You're kidding.
No. It was found at an archaeological site called Shar-i-Sukte. The images on the goblet are like, well, it's a series of drawings, and if you view them in sequence, they appear to show movement.
That's incredible. I mean, that predates any other known form of animation by thousands of years.
Crazy.
Right. Okay, so Iranian culture isn't all ancient artifacts, right? What about daily life in Iran today?
Well, one thing that stands out is how young their population is. The majority are under 30.
That's a massive demographic shift. What kind of impact does that have on society?
It brings this really dynamic energy, this drive for change, but it also means there's a huge need for things like education, employment, affordable housing, Addressing those needs is crucial for Iran's future.
That makes sense. It's like a balancing act, this potential with the need to manage those challenges.
Exactly. And of course, we can't talk about daily life in Iran without recognizing the role of Islam.
Right, we've been talking about it being an Islamic republic.
And over 90% of Iranians are Shia Muslims. It's woven into many parts of life. You see it in the legal system, social customs, personal beliefs, everything.
But I was also reading that other religious groups exist in Iran too, right?
Definitely. There are Christians, Jews, Zoroastrians. They've all been there for centuries. They're smaller in number, sure, but they contribute to this rich cultural tapestry.
It's fascinating how all these different cultural and religious threads are interwoven in modern Iran.
It really is. And it underscores just how complex Iran is as a country.
Now, we've mentioned sanctions a couple of times. Can you, break that down for us? What exactly are they and why are they in place?
So sanctions are basically economic and political penalties that countries or international organizations impose on another country.
Okay.
And with Iran, a lot of the sanctions are tied to their nuclear program.
Right. There's that concern that they might be developing nuclear weapons.
Yep, that's been a major sticking point for years. And those concerns have led to rounds of sanctions, mainly from the United States and the European Union.
And how do those sanctions impact Iran and the people living there?
They affect pretty much everything. Trade, finance, travel, you name it. It makes it tougher for Iranian businesses to operate, for their companies to access financial markets. Even everyday people find it harder to travel abroad.
So it's not just politics. It really affects the everyday lives of Iranians.
Absolutely. And it's a topic that generates a lot of discussion and debate, both inside and outside Iran.
Okay, let's switch gears again. This time to something a little more positive, Iran's advancements in science and technology.
Despite all the challenges they face, it's pretty remarkable how much progress they've made, especially in fields like nanotechnology and biotechnology, even aerospace engineering.
They've got their own space program.
They do. They've successfully launched satellites and even sent animals into space. It really speaks to the ingenuity and determination of Iranian scientists and engineers.
It's inspiring to see them pushing those boundaries. This deep dive is really making me rethink what I thought I knew about Iran.
That's what's so great about deep dives. They challenge your assumptions and show you things you never expected.
Speaking of which, we've talked about Persian carpets and that ancient animation, but there's got to be more to Iranian art and culture, right?
So much more. It's incredibly diverse. You've got everything from calligraphy and miniature painting to film and modern art. And we can't forget about literature.
Persian poetry is amazing. I love Rumi.
Oh, yeah, Rumi, Hafez, Ferdowsi, some of the greatest poets of all time. Persian poetry has such a long and rich history.
It's amazing how Rumi's words still resonate with people centuries later.
That's the power of art. It transcends time and place.
All right, I know we've covered a lot already, but got to ask about sports. What role do sports play in Iranian culture?
Huge role, especially football. They have a really passionate fan base, and their national team's got a proud history. They've won the Asian Cup 3 times, even qualified for the World Cup a few times.
Wow. I can only imagine the atmosphere in those stadiums. What about other sports?
Well, wrestling's actually considered their national sport. It's called Koshitiya Palavani.
That's a really traditional form of wrestling,
It
right?
is. And it's more than just a sport. It's tied to all these cultural values: strength, technique, sportsmanship.
It's incredible how Iran manages to blend the ancient and the modern in so many different ways.
Right. It speaks to their resilience, their creativity, how deeply connected they are to their heritage.
Before we wrap up this first part of our deep dive, I've got to mention one thing that really impressed me: their commitment to education.
Yeah, education is highly valued in Iranian society. Their literacy rate is over 85%, and they put a huge emphasis on higher education.
I was reading about some of their universities. They have some very prestigious institutions.
Absolutely. Universities like the University of Tehran and Sharif University of Technology, they're known for their academic excellence, and they attract students from all over the world.
That's fantastic. It's great to see that dedication to knowledge.
Yeah, it reflects this deep belief in the power of education to change lives and to make society better. It's a value that's really ingrained in Iranian culture.
This deep dive has been so eye-opening. I'm already seeing Iran in a whole new light.
That's what it's all about. It has been a fascinating journey so far, hasn't it? And we've really only just begun to scratch the surface.
I know, right? It's amazing how much there is to learn about Iran. I feel like we could spend hours talking about their culture alone. Like, we haven't even mentioned the food yet.
Persian food. It's a true delight for the senses. Such a beautiful blend of flavors and aromas.
Okay, give us some examples. What are we talking about here?
Well, you've got dishes like cholo kebab,
Oh, yeah, I had that.
gourmet, sabzi, fezenjan. These are dishes that have been tantalizing taste buds for centuries.
I've had cholo kebab. It's amazing. The saffron rice with the grilled meat, so good. What are some of the key ingredients or flavors that make Persian cuisine unique?
Well, herbs play a huge role. Parsley, cilantro, mint, dill, you find them in a lot of dishes.
Makes sense. Fresh herbs, always good.
And then there's saffron,
Oh, yeah.
the red gold of Iran.
Wow.
It adds this beautiful color and aroma.
It's so distinctive.
And of course, the spices: cardamom, turmeric, cinnamon, cumin, the list goes on.
It's like a whole symphony of flavors going on. Okay, switching gears a bit, I was reading about Iran's long tradition of storytelling.
Oh, yeah?
They even have, like, a specific term for these traditional storytellers, right?
Yeah. Yes, they're called nakhwal.
Nakhwal.
And they're more than just storytellers, really. They're performers, historians, keepers of cultural memory.
Wow.
They really bring these tales to life, often incorporating music and poetry and even like elements of theater into their performances.
It sounds captivating. Is that tradition still alive today in modern Iran?
It is, but it's facing challenges, I mean, there's so much modern entertainment now, but there are still dedicated nakhwal who are keeping this ancient art form alive. In fact, nakhwali is recognized by UNESCO as an intangible cultural heritage of humanity.
That's amazing. It's so important to preserve these cultural treasures, I think. Now, we talked earlier about Iran having a very young population.
Yeah, it's a pretty striking demographic.
How does that youthful energy, like, manifest itself in Iranian society? What does it look like on the ground?
Well, it's definitely palpable. You can feel it. Young Iranians are shaping the cultural landscape. They're embracing technology, pushing the boundaries in the arts, and engaging in social and political discourse in new ways.
They're driving change and progress, it sounds like.
They are, but of course, there are challenges too. A young population also means there's a greater need for educational opportunities, for job creation, for affordable housing.
Right, makes sense.
Meeting those needs is going to be crucial to ensure a stable and prosperous future for Iran.
It's a reminder that progress isn't always a straight line. It takes effort and commitment to invest in the next generation.
Exactly. And speaking of investing in the future, let's talk about education in Iran.
I was really impressed by what I read about their education system. It seems like learning is highly valued there.
It is. Iran has a literacy rate of over 85%.
Wow.
That's pretty remarkable, especially considering some of the challenges they've faced. And they place a strong emphasis on higher education, too.
Yeah, I read that some of their universities are considered among the best in the region.
That's right. You've got universities like University of Tehran and Sharif University of Technology. They're well known for their academic programs and their research output. They attract students from all over, not just from Iran.
That's a sign of a quality education. Sounds like there's a real thirst for knowledge there.
There is. And it comes from this belief that education can uplift individuals and advance society as a whole. contribute to a better future for Iran. It's a deeply ingrained value.
Okay, so we've got this dynamism of young people, this emphasis on education, the role of Islam in society. But what about the sanctions? How do those actually impact the daily lives of ordinary Iranians?
It's a complex issue, and the effects are widespread. Sanctions make it harder for businesses to operate, which can lead to job losses, economic struggles.
Right.
And they also limit access to things like essential goods and services. I mean, even medicine and medical equipment.
So it's not just some abstract political thing. It
No.
has real human consequences.
It absolutely does. It's a constant weight on the minds of many Iranians.
It's a stark reminder that these international relations issues, they play out in the real world for real people. Okay, let's shift gears again to something a little lighter, art. I was really blown away by the range of artistic expression in Iran.
Yeah, it's a vibrant and dynamic art scene for sure. Everything from those traditional forms, calligraphy, miniature painting, to contemporary art and film. There's this richness and depth to it that's just, well, captivating.
I know we talked about poetry earlier, but what about these other forms of art? What are some of the things that make Iranian art unique?
Well, one thing that stands out is the use of intricate patterns and designs. You see it everywhere, in carpets and textiles, architecture, calligraphy even.
Oh yeah, the carpets especially.
There's a real appreciation for detail and craftsmanship.
For sure.
And then there's the use of color. Iranian art is often very colorful, vibrant, like it's reflecting the beauty and diversity of nature.
Right.
And there's this strong storytelling element to a lot of it too, whether it's poetry, music, painting, or film. Iranian artists are really good at weaving these narratives that captivate and inspire.
It makes me want to go experience it all firsthand. Okay, back to the space program for a second.
Yeah.
It still blows my mind that they have one.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Despite all the obstacles, sanctions, limited resources, they've managed to create this robust space program. They're launching satellites, conducting experiments, the whole thing.
So impressive. What are some of the goals of the program? What are they hoping to achieve?
Well, there are practical applications, obviously. Things like using satellites for communication, Earth observation, that sort of thing.
Sure.
But it's also about national pride, It's about demonstrating their scientific and technological capabilities to the world.
It's like saying, hey, we're here, we're capable, and we're making our mark.
Exactly. And it's really inspiring to see that kind of determination, pushing boundaries despite the challenges.
I love it. Okay, let's talk about something that often gets overlooked in discussions about Iran, their sense of humor.
Oh, yeah.
I was reading that Iranians have a very rich tradition of satire and comedy.
Absolutely. Humor is a big part of the culture. It's how they cope with challenges, express dissent, even connect with each other.
I've heard they have a very sharp wit.
They do, often with a good dose of irony and self-deprecation.
It's good to remember that even in the face of adversity, there's always room for laughter and a little lightheartedness. Now, as we start to wrap up our deep dive, I want to touch on one more aspect of Iranian culture, their hospitality.
Oh, yes, legendary Iranian hospitality.
They have that saying, right? A guest is a gift from God.
That's right. Guests are treated with such respect and kindness. It's considered a real honor to host someone in your home, and they'll do everything they can to make you feel welcome and comfortable.
I've heard stories of people being invited into strangers' homes for tea and conversation.
It happens. They're very warm, welcoming people, and they love to share their culture and traditions with others.
It's a beautiful thing, that generosity of spirit. Okay, before we move on to final thoughts, I want to circle back to something we discussed earlier, the complexities of Iranian politics.
It's a topic that deserves more attention, I think. There's just so much nuance there.
For sure. I'm especially interested in the role of women in Iranian politics. I know there are restrictions in place, but I've also read about women who are breaking through those barriers, making their voices heard.
It's true. Women in Iran face a lot of challenges, but they're also incredibly resilient and determined. They're active in many fields, including politics, and they're fighting for more representation and equality.
What are some of the specific challenges they face?
Well, there are legal and societal barriers that limit their participation. For instance, there are quotas on how many women can serve in parliament.
Right.
And then there are these cultural norms that can make it tough for women to run for office or speak out on certain issues.
So it's an uphill battle, but it sounds like they are making progress.
They are. There's this growing movement of women who are challenging the status quo, demanding their rights, and they're making their voices heard, both inside Iran and on the global stage.
It's inspiring to see people fighting for what they believe in. It's a reminder that change often comes from those grassroots efforts.
Absolutely. And those voices are so important if we want to create a more just and equitable society.
This deep dive has been so enlightening. I feel like I've gained a much deeper understanding of Iran and its people.
I'm glad to hear that.
But before we wrap up completely, I'm curious to get your perspective on something. We talked about Iran's past and present, but what about its future?
Ah, the big question.
Yeah. What do you see as some of the key factors that will shape Iran's future?
Well, there are so many variables at play, both within Iran and externally.
Right.
Internally, you have the whole issue of generational change. This younger generation coming of age and starting to exert their influence.
Makes sense.
And then you have that ongoing debate about the role of Islam in Iranian society, finding that balance between religious and secular values.
It's a lot of internal dynamism happening there. What about external factors?
Well, externally, Iran's relationship with the international community, especially the West, will definitely be a key factor.
Right.
Sanctions, the nuclear program, all those regional tensions, they all play a role.
It's a pretty complicated geopolitical landscape. Hard to say what the future holds.
It is. But one thing is for sure, Iran will continue to be a major player in the region and on the world stage.
Well said. Okay, this deep dive has been so fascinating. I feel like I've learned so much. But before we go, any final thoughts or key takeaways you want to leave us with?
You know, I think the biggest takeaway for me is just how complex and nuanced Iran really is. It's this place where ancient history intersects with these modern-day challenges, where vibrant culture exists alongside political tensions, and where the resilience and spirit of the Iranian people just shines through.
Couldn't agree more. It's been a real privilege to delve into these topics with you and gain a deeper appreciation for Iran and its people.
It's been a pleasure.
And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into Iran. We hope you found it as enlightening and thought-provoking as we have. It feels like we've just scratched the surface here.
I know, right? Iran is a country that's hard to put in a box, you know?
Totally. We've covered so much geography, history, politics, economy, even culture. But what are the big takeaways? What do we want our listeners to really walk away with?
Well, I think first and foremost, it's understanding that Iran's geography isn't just some pretty background, right? It's those mountains and deserts and that coastline. They've actually shaped Iran's history and culture for centuries.
It's like the land itself is a character in the story of Iran.
Yeah, exactly. And then you can't really grasp modern-day Iran without understanding its history, right? It's thousands of years of empires and cultural exchanges, conquests, revolutions, all of that's still there, influencing everything you see of a day.
Wow. So it's not just about today's headlines. It's layers upon layers of history shaping things.
Exactly. And finally, I think it's so important to recognize that Iranian culture is incredibly rich and complex. It's so much more than what we see in the news or in movies, There's this incredible depth and beauty to their art, their literature, their music, even their food.
You're making me hungry again.
Seriously, it's a cultural tapestry that deserves to be explored.
So what does this all mean for you, listener? Why should you care about this deep dive into Iran?
Well, it's about challenging your assumptions, right? It's about expanding your understanding of the world.
But appreciating the nuances of a country that's often portrayed in very simplistic, sometimes even negative ways.
Yeah, for sure. And it's about recognizing that shared humanity, even when there are political or cultural differences.
Well said. Now, before we say goodbye, I have one final thought I want to leave you with, something to ponder. We've talked about Iran's past, its present, but what about its future?
The big question.
What role will Iran play in the world in the years to come? What are the possible paths, the good and the bad?
Those are definitely questions worth thinking about, and it just highlights how important it is to stay informed, to stay engaged, to be open to different points of view.
This deep dive, it's really just the beginning, right?
Absolutely.
Now it's up to you, listener, to continue exploring. Happy learning, everyone.